Yeah, that's exactly what I've been doing. Poor old Lindsay, I've been walking around and she'll just be like doing whatever, just working. And I'll just walk past, this is the kingdom. And she's flipping out the rest of my life. So we are in our 4th week out of 5. We're looking at the Northern Kingdom. So this is a video which hopefully has less sirens and unfortunately does not have a man doing kung fu in the background. I know, sadly, but we are filmed in the south, but it's about the Northern Kingdom. So if we've got video and sound, thank you very much.
This is the kingdom, kingdom. This is the kingdom, kingdom. Everybody's building empires, building walls high in the name of glory. Everybody's hanging high wires. It's a fine line. It's an age-old story. The first will be last, and the last will be kings. The small will be great.
We all know that the north is better than the south. I mean, intuitively, that's just right. We get that. But in the story of Kings, not so much. This is going to be our 2nd week looking at the Northern Kingdom. Now, in the Northern Kingdom, remember, this is called Israel, and it was split off and they had no temple. And their first king, Jeroboam, was promised that if they worshipped God and didn't build idols, he would have a legacy. And that simply hasn't happened. Straight away, Israel started to build idols, started to turn away. And the story has been one of political assassination, of murder, and of bad king after bad king. 20 kings have come and gone, and things have not improved. And what we're going to see here is this is the finale. This is the end. We're going to see that the kingdom that was 10 tribes of Israel falls apart and is destroyed.
This is the kingdom. Heaven coming down.
That is right, that's where we're at. I was explaining how much I didn't like the videos, and it's really awkward to watch yourself on video. And Lily, who's in here somewhere, she was like, she said, oh, you mean those videos where you walk around like a boss? That made me instantly feel better about it all. And I was like, yeah, those videos, Lily. And then I was thinking, yeah, Lily says I'm like a boss. And then I went into work the next day, and I met a real boss. And so I went into the bathroom at work, stay with me. And this guy was like, I walked in, and he'd banged like 2 hand dryers, and he was just doing this to dry his hands. Just like 1 hand dryer each. And then I thought he was going to be embarrassed when I came in, and he just turned to me and was like, and I was like, oh man, this man knows. He's like the king of the bathroom. I was like, he's going to demand a fee for me to pee here. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not the boss. This man with his strange habits, he's the boss. And so we are looking at the Northern powerhouse. And so the North and South Kingdom, it's split up way back with kind of 200 years earlier. It had split between the North and South under King Solomon. And so what we've got, the Northern Kingdom called Israel, a Southern Kingdom called Judah. And we live in a country which has a North and South divide, sort of. Not quite as extreme as this. We didn't have our own kind of kingdom, kings and so on. But we know there's a difference between the North and the South. We know it. If I had to say what are some stereotypes about the North and the South, you would look at this kind of thing, that a pint of beer in the North is like £2.50, £3. In London, £400. That's about right. That feels about right. The classic stereotype that Northerners are friendlier. And people always go, oh yeah, if you go down to the tube, no one speaks to you. Like if you're in the North, you're on a bus, everyone's like high-fiving and go, all right, pal, like that actually happens. And we've got a little video which will hopefully explain and go into what we really believe about the North being friendlier.
Finally, a Northerner has been accused of terrorising London by walking around saying hello. Generic Northerner Stephen Malley left Londoners traumatised by his attempts to interact with them in a friendly, cheerful manner. Here's Nathan with more.
Malley arrived here at Oxford Circus at 9:32 this morning. He had already said hello to several people en route from King's Cross Station, leaving worried commuters unsure why a man they did not know was talking to them.
He made direct eye contact and then said, "Morning." First I thought, well, is this just a statement? Because, I mean, it was the morning, but no, something in his tone suggested this was a greeting.
Malley was apprehended by London police, who were forced to let him go, as friendliness to strangers is not a crime until next year. Outside the station, Mally gave a statement.
Where I come from, it's okay to greet strangers or comment to them about the weather. I did not know the customs of London, and I apologise if I offended anyone. I did not mean to be happy. I'm going back on the train now.
And Nathan, what should Londoners do if approached by a northerner?
Headphones on, head down, and avoid eye contact. They are generally friendly, but they will headbutt if cornered.
That is it. That's what they think of us down the south. And so, if you are from the south, you all know that's where the line is, right? Watford. Don't worry about being halfway up the country or any madness like that. If you get north of Watford, the north. If Charlie Law was here or Charlie Dalton, she would agree with that. She would be like, yeah, when I came north of Watford, it was all a scary northern place. She was like this, the south of England, the beautiful place. But what's that shadowy place over there? That's Watford. Don't go north of that. And so that is the kind of split that we have in this country. Kind of. And it's a little bit jokey if you go away. I went to uni in Nottingham, which is in the middle, and there is no middle, right? Everyone's north or south, and some of my friends are the north and south, and it became this kind of rivalry. But we're in this situation where this is a proper split. This isn't like, oh, you're a little bit different. This was a kingdom in the south and a kingdom in the north. And in the south, as the video said, the south had Jerusalem and it had the temple. And so they had the kind of big place where people come to worship. And also they had David's descendants on the throne. You'd had David, then you had Solomon, then you had Solomon's son. And they had David's line. And the north, they kind of had nothing like that. They kind of removed themselves from the whole kingdom. And they did that from a good place because they were kind of being forced into labor, and God had said, I am going to split this kingdom between the south and the north. And God had said he was going to do it. And the first king of the north, a guy called Jeroboam, Rehoboam's Solomon's son. There's a lot of confusing names, all right, as Andy Wright was saying to me before. Jeroboam, the first king, God had said to him, look, if you follow me, I will give you a legacy, just like I'm going to give David and his descendants. So just because they'd moved to the north, there was no less of a promise for them. There was no less of a call from God on their life. But you can think, oh, but they've got everything, right? They've got the real kings. They've got the temple. And we can feel a little bit like that sometimes in our life, particularly in the north. You know, there's the phrase, it's grim up north. You know, we all know that. That's kind of the way it is. And we can feel that maybe our lives are not quite as easy as some of the other people around us. Maybe it can look at it and think, oh man, other people just have an easier ride or a smoother ride, and life doesn't really go the way we want it to go. And I get that, and some of us probably do have tougher lives than others. There's no kind of question on that. But the same call comes to all of us about, can we follow God? Like the northern tribes, they didn't have as much as the southern tribes in terms of the hub or the David king. But they had 10 tribes, and they had a bunch of people, and they had the ability to follow God, and he was still going to be their king and their God if they chose to follow him. And in a preach like this, it can feel like maybe this is like a history lesson, and that's what we're going to kind of do. But I just want to think, like, if we're in this place of thinking maybe nothing kind of seems to go right for me. The northern kingdom, as we're going to see, is a place where people overthrow governments, they murder each other, they try and get a better king, and nothing works. Like king after king after king after king, and nothing works. And maybe we feel like, do you know what? I've tried a bunch of stuff, and nothing seems to be working. Nothing seems to be kind of coming off. And that's what we're going to be looking at here. So the first thing we see, and we're going to read a whole bunch of verses throughout this, is we see this is a history of violence. And so another thing that the northerners are possibly known for is that we can known for being a little bit aggressive, a little bit violent, a little bit harder than the south, allegedly. And so you'll see things like this going up on Twitter when it's bad weather. So weather warning, southerners do not travel unless absolutely necessary. Northerners, you'll need your big coat. That's what a net would be like. And, I'd be like, like, I'm not a proper southerner. I'd be like, it's too cold to walk. And that would be like, probably a jumper. And that's about right. And so, and that's proper north. Southerners think snow is pretty. Northerners, we have this attitude, this isn't snow, just you wait. I was born in an igloo and drove to snow on a snowmobile. I eat ice for every meal. I can't wait to die in a snowbank. Warmth, never heard of it. And I always say this to Lindsay, we have this weird thing in England that we're so proud of how rough our towns are. If you say, oh, it's quite rough where I live, someone will go, oh, let me tell you about where I live and why. It's just weird. We just do it all the time. And she notices it all the time. And the final one about how tough Northerners think we are, it's a proven scientific fact that Northerners are harder than Southerners. Well, there's no actual evidence, but come on, just look at them. The hardest men in the entire South, like Vinnie Jones and Ross Kemp, could still be beaten by the weakest, most malnourished child from the North. Even the words they use to describe hard people, like naughty, handy, and tasty, they sound soft. And so the Northerners, they're proud of being hard, right? And that's the same as we're going to see here. Some of you are like, please read the Bible. I'm there. And so we're there, 2 Kings 15, before we have a rebellion. And we're going to see rebellions in this passage. They are not good. But they think that they're tough. They are the separated northern kingdom. And this passage is madness. We're going to see 2 Kings 15. And so there's a lot of names going on. There's a lot of dates going on. So bear with it. I might skip the odd bit because there's a lot of just names. So in the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah. And if you read the passages, it does flip between Judah and Israel, the south and the north. And it is quite hard to stick with. But basically, Zechariah becomes king. That's all we need to know. And he reigns for 6 months. And then we're going to see a phrase after that a lot. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his predecessors had done. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which had caused Israel to commit. And we're going to come back to that in a second. That's that first king. And so it says he reigned for 6 months. But then Shallum, son of Jabez, conspired against him. He attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. So there we go. In 2 Kings 15, that's our first king, and he gets killed. And then he becomes king in the 39th year, and he reigns for 1 month. And then Menahem goes up, attacks him, assassinates him, succeeds him as king. And believe me, there is going to be a pattern here. So 2 kings, 2 assassinations. Then we have this guy, Menahem. And he starts out, and it says, basically, I won't read all that, but he attacks somebody because they refuse to open the gates. He sacks them, and he rips open all the pregnant women. And so he's an unpleasant guy. And then some other king comes to attack him, we'll see. But in the middle bit, it says, Menahem did evil in the eyes of the Lord, did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And then a king invades and says, right, I need you to give me 1,000 talents of silver. And so what Menahem does is he gets all the rich people and basically demands money from them so that they can survive. So this horrible king, he's going around killing people, robbing money off people, and he's the one who basically is king for ages, and then he eventually stops being king. Then we have another guy called Pekahiah, and basically that bit in bold, what happens is he gets assassinated, someone takes over from him as king, and then somebody else becomes king, and then the bit in bold there, he gets attacked and he gets assassinated. Okay, and so basically in one chapter we have 4 assassinations. The one who doesn't get assassinated, he's the one who basically kills a load of pregnant women and demands loads of money from people. So we have just a horrific set of kings. And so this is why you start with the northerner jokes, because you got to start with them because you're going to go into a bit of murder. And so therefore this is a dark, dark time. And the thing that we see over and over again is that it's mentioned he did the sins of Jeroboam. He did the sins of Jeroboam. And Jeroboam is that first king. And he starts off, God says, right, you can have this legacy if you follow me. And straight away Jeroboam panics because he says, well, we ain't got the temple. And if we ain't got the temple, what everyone's going to do is they're going to leave the north. They're going to go to the south where all the stuff is, where David's sons are. They're going to go there and they're going to leave us. They're going to worship God and I'm going to have nobody. And so instead of saying, right, okay, what can we do? We'll build an altar to God. He says, right, I'm going to let people worship whoever they want. And they build idols and they build golden calves and they just worship them. And straight away he's so afraid of the people that he just goes, right, let's do what you want. And immediately the nation just starts to slide. And fear just leads to stupid decisions and taking people away. In our life group, we've been looking at Abraham. And Abraham's this guy that we all kind of love and think's amazing. But you know what? He's faced with fear so many times, and it leads him into stupid decisions often where he's like, oh man, if I go with my wife, and my life group think I've got a problem, because in the Bible it always tells us how pretty Sarah was all the time, even though she was probably in her 80s. And it's a bit weird, right? And so it says, like, Sarah was very beautiful. And then the next one it'll say, Sarah was very old. I'm like, okay, fair enough, Bible, different standards, I accept that. And so he's there going, oh no, everyone's going to think she's amazing. I'm going to tell them she's my sister so they don't kill me and try and get to her. And he panics instead of trusting God. And he does it again and again and again. And then every now and then he'll be there and he'll just trust God, because fear can lead to stupid decisions. Like Jeroboam puts the whole nation of the north in trouble because he is fearful, and he basically leads to a place where he doesn't follow God. In Galatians 1:10, Paul says this. The Apostle Paul, who becomes a Christian, a religious guy, and meets with God, and he was persecuting him and then follows God. And it says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I wouldn't be a servant of God. And I have a friend who is a bit of a panicker. His name is Mark, and he's like my oldest and best friend. And like when situations come to him, he panics. Like he once had to, when he first was driving, he had to do this U-turn to get into his drive. So he drive down the street, and then his driveway was in a U-turn. And he overshot it a little bit. I thought, oh, I'm going to hit a tree. And this is in his dad's car, and he's like 18. And so he's like, oh no, I've gone too far. And so instead of panicking and then hitting the brake, he panicked and hit the accelerator and just went, and then just like absolutely just demolished the whole side of the car, the windscreen, all the doors, smashed into it, knocked this tree down. And his dad was away, and then Mark was going on holiday the next day. So he just left a note saying, Dad, I've ruined the car, thanks. And so he just panics and just hammers down. And I remember talking to Mark about this verse that Paul had said about pleasing people. And I was thinking Mark was going to be like, oh yeah, I struggle with that. And he just said, no, I feel so released, because Paul's saying, don't worry about pleasing people. Like, you actually don't need to do it. And I was like, oh man, this guy who I think's a panicker knows God so well that he's like, no, I'm not going to try and please people. I'm going to do what God's called me to do. And we've talked about this guy, Gary Grant, who runs the Entertainer toy shop. I've talked about it many times, that this chain of toy shops that's not open on a Sunday because he feels that God has told him to do that. And there's loads of businesses struggling in the high street. For some reason, this one shop that kind of isn't open one of the days a week carries on. And it carries on because that's what God told him to do. And it makes no sense. And in the eyes of the world, it's madness to do that. And I've kind of known that for years, and I forgot that my mate Mark, his wife's mum is from the same town as Gary when he set up the toy shop. And she said that this guy was setting up a toy shop in their town way, way, way back. And a bunch of them said, this guy wants to set up a toy shop and employ some people, but he's not a Christian. We're just going to pray for him that he knows Jesus. And these 4 women just got together, and they were just praying for their town. They just prayed that Gary Grant would know Jesus. And then one day, this guy became a Christian, and therefore now doesn't open these stores. So when we walk around Warrington today, you'll see one store not open. You know, it started from 4 people in a room going, I think God's put this guy on my heart. And it looked different. It was like, why would we pray for this random guy who owns a toy shop? And there's a legacy that goes when we trust God, when he moves through our actions, when he says, hey, I've got a plan. But what I want to do is I want to partner with people. Like, God can do what he wants to do. But the madness is he chooses to use us. And he responds when we're obedient, and when we're faithful, he moves through that. So Israel are nowhere near what they're meant to be. In Genesis, they're told to be a blessing to other nations. When Solomon dedicates the temple, it's meant to be so that foreigners can come and know God. And yet they've become this crazy place where everyone's killing each other. They're doing what they want to do, and it's just a war-y place. And they just needed to remember who they were supposed to be. And as I was reading that, I was like, all right, God, this is difficult. What's this? And I was just getting a feeling of I was thinking who are we meant to be? Remember those days when you were kind of maybe young and thinking what is God calling me to be? And it all stretches out in front of you and it's exciting. And you kind of know, I think I'm supposed to do this with my life. The question would be where are we at with that? Where are we at as Latchford? We started this church, we talked about last week, 7 years ago. And I think sometimes we just need to ask ourselves, Where are we at with who we're meant to be? Right? And that is a question that we've been thinking about a lot in terms of what is God calling us to be? And is that still something that's really exciting us and stirring us? Or just in the midst of routine, do we just forget that? Do we just forget who we're called to be? Do we just kind of get on with our day by day rather than thinking, God, this matters more than everything else? And so the first thing is they just slowly kind of descend and they get violent. The second thing we don't see is we don't see a heroic rescue, and we're expecting that, right? Things are getting bad, things are rubbish. Somewhere there's going to be a hero. He's going to step in and he's going to save the day, because Hollywood teaches us that. If you have watched the new Star Wars film, I say new, it was out in like December. If you've not watched it, and this is going to upset you, cover your ears and eyes for like a second. But you know what it's like? You were watching this Star Wars film and you kind of think, it's all over, isn't it? That's the end, the darkness has won. But you know it isn't the end. Imagine how bold they would have been to do the last ever Star Wars film going, oh yeah, by the way, the darkness wins. Sorry, everybody, lights up, go home. Like, that would have been pretty bad. But what we're expecting is our next video, which is very loud, I believe. But our next video will show us what we expect.
Where's the streetwise earth that leads the fight rising on? Isn't there a white knight upon a fire steed? Late at night I toss and I turn and I dream of what I need. I'm a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be strong, he's gotta be soon, and he's gotta be larger than life.
There we go. That music is not in Star Wars. And so that would be a weird end, wouldn't it? If you just get into the big finish and they go, I need a hero. No, it's not there. It's not there, but we're expecting that, right? You're thinking, this is getting bad. Kings are killing each other. The nation's far away from God. And you expect to read it and go, but there's a great king. And then this happened, and then God changed it. Well, 2 Kings 17. The reason we've skipped from 15 to 17 is 16 goes and talks about the southern kingdom. So we come back into the north in 17. And it says, the first paragraph, it says, Hoshea, son of Elah, became king of Israel, reigned in Samaria, reigned for 9 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not like the kings who preceded him. Then Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up to attack him, who had been his vassal and had paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered Hoshea was a traitor, for he'd sent envoys to So, king of Egypt, no longer pay tribute to the king of Assyria, as he'd done year on year. Therefore, Shalmaneser seized him, put him in prison. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Hala and Gozan on the Harbor River and in the towns of the Medes. And this kingdom, this warring kingdom where they're taking each other down, this kingdom was meant to be a light to the nation, that's meant to be, if you follow me, I will give you a legacy, gets captured, gets weak, and gets destroyed. And we're thinking, surely, though, that can't be the end, right? It can't be the end. But further on in that chapter, it tells us this. It tells us, and this is going back to the real start of the north. And he says, when he tore Israel away from the house of David, so that's when the kingdom split 200 years earlier, they made Jeroboam, that first king, son of Nebat, their king. But he enticed Israel away from following the Lord, causing them to commit a great sin. And the Israelites persisted in that sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all of his servants, the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria and are still there. Okay, and so we kind of think, yeah, but that can't be the end. But that is a story that's getting lived over and over and over again in our world right now, is that people who maybe have a calling on their life, that God has a plan for them, God has something to do, and they just miss it. You know, not because they're terrible people. Some of them don't even know. And that is where our job comes in, that some of these people have got like this great plan that God's got for them, and they have no idea that God even knows who they are. Like Chris was saying about God was kind of looks at us like tiny ants, and yet he has plans and loves us. Well, that's the plan he has for Latchford and people in Latchford, and they are never going to know unless people go and tell them this. And they will live missing it. And you think, well, it can't end like that, can it? Well, it can end like that, and it does end like that, because our job is to go and tell people that there is a God like that. I have a friend who is convinced that, he said, do you know what, Dale, I think you might be right that there's a God, but I'm just going to convert on my deathbed. It's one of them annoying friends, like really annoying. It's like, you're probably right, but I'm going to game the system and convert on my deathbed. And he thinks he's clever and smart by doing that like he can just get this little ticket to heaven. Well, like, we all know that you don't just get a deathbed. That's not how life works necessarily. And secondly, like, that isn't Christianity. It isn't about this just ticket of like, phew, I can get to heaven one day. Like, we got to believe that knowing God is the greatest thing. It's just the best thing. And I try and tell him, you are missing out. If you live this way, you're missing out. It's not just about one day it'll be worth it. It's about now. It's about now we have this God that we know now. Like Israel was supposed to follow him so that they could be led and they could always be the people that they were called to be. They could live their lives that they were always meant to live. And I want to be some people who live that. I want to be a church and a people who go, I want to follow what God has for me now. Not just that one day it might work out for me. I don't want to be somebody who kind of just gets worse and worse and worse. And sometimes we have to recognize that we are the people that God is calling to be, not the rescue, because it's only God that's the rescue. But you know what? We need to introduce him to the rescuer. We need to say, do you know what? Your life might feel like it's chaos. It might feel out of control. But I tell you, I've been there. Let me tell you about one who can sort out the chaos, one who can bring hope to that mess and to the disaster. And that is what we want to be. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking of all the people in my life who don't know God. The honest question came to me. It was like, how much do you care? And I was just like, oh, I care. And I sat there and I was like, how much do I actually care? Oh man, it was tough. It was tough. Like, when was the last time I really just brought up the awkwardness of like, hey, let me just tell you about a time when I went through something like this in my life and what God did for me. Make it a bit weird. Make it a bit like, oh no, what if they think I'm odd? Well, do you know what? We've got to look different, right? Israel were meant to look different to people around them, and the guy was so afraid of people, he just said anything goes. And we can be so afraid of people that we don't live out what we're meant to do. And I don't want to be that church. I want to be a church that knows what it is to reach him to our community. So we get to this stage where 922 all splits. 200 years later, the kingdom ends. And that is it. 722, like, it's the end. And you think, well, yeah, but there's got to be a good thing. But in 2 Kings 17, I'm not going to read the rest of it because there's another like 17 verses. It tells us the Assyrians, they capture Israel and they take it away. And so that is it. And then they just bring loads of people to settle in this land called Samaria. So that's what Israel now is named. So there's no kingdom there. So this area called Samaria, people get sent to there. Then there are loads of lions that kill people who are not following God, which is a weird bit. You can read that. And if you're not sure about the theology with that, you can ask a theologian. And then the king sends a priest to go teach people about God. And what happens is, it becomes this melting pot that people are taught about God, but they believe everything else as well. So it's like there is a little bit about teaching about God, but there's also a whole set of other things. And it finishes with this, and it says, they wouldn't listen to the priest, and they persisted in their former practices. Even while these people were worshipping the Lord, they carried on serving their idols. And to this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did. And so at 722 BC, there's talk of God, but the nation becomes a mess. And that is the nation that Jesus talks about in the New Testament, where he talks about the Good Samaritan, and he says, oh, there was a Good Samaritan from that place. And the Jewish people have been like, what, from there? From that old bit of Israel, that rogue bit that went really rubbish, where no one really believes anything. And yeah, they believe God, but they worship idols. And when Jesus tells a story of like, oh, there's a Good Samaritan, people are appalled because nothing good can come from there. Because the good Jewish people, which Andy will finish us with next week, they're in the south, right? They're the people who stuck at it a little bit longer. When Nehemiah comes and rebuilds the walls and Ezra comes and does the temple, it's in the south. The north is nothing. For 750 years, the north is nothing. Until John chapter 4, verses 4 to 7, we see Jesus. And now we see, now it says now he, which is Jesus. Now Jesus had to go through Samaria, this land of just chaos and nothing. He had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near a plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well, and it was about noon. And then a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? And he starts to talk to her. And she's like people of Samaria. She knows about God, but she's got all other kind of thoughts going on. She doesn't really know. And she is the woman that Jesus says, hey, the kingdom of God's here, and I am the one that was to come. This woman with a bad reputation, who's had 1 million husbands. This woman who would have been at the bottom of society. And Jesus is going, hey, let me tell you about the kingdom that is to come. And then it says, after that, it says, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town, and she said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this guy be the Messiah? They came out of the town. They made their way towards him. And then it tells us many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe because of what you said. Now we've heard for ourselves, and we know this man really is the Savior of the world. And so out of nowhere, Jesus wanders into this kind of forgotten and broken world. And he's not there looking for a king. He's not going, who can be the next good king? He looks for a woman with a bad reputation, with a world of brokenness. And he says, hey, this is a woman who's going to take on what I've got to say. And she's going to go and she's going to tell her town. And then her town are going to know that the kingdom is coming. And from there, we see Samaria come back to life again. Because Jesus isn't looking for the best of us to be king of Warrington. He's looking for ordinary people with broken lives to say, hey, what you're going to say to me, God, I'm going to take seriously, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to tell a broken world, hey, let me tell you about this guy who's changed everything in me. Let me tell you about this guy who is transforming lives and has hope and brings hope into the brokenness. And so we're not Samaria here. We're not this kind of crazy world of everything. But you know what? In so many ways, our town is broken, and our world needs a lot. And you know, in the middle of that, God brings, just as we see Jesus here, he speaks into the kind of chaos in a small way with an unusual person, and he breathes life into a hopeless situation. I don't know about you, but I'm not too big to be like that Samaritan woman who thinks, oh man, you know, God will use me because maybe I'm good enough. Do you know what? God won't use me because I'm good enough. But I want him to see me as a man who will at least deal with the things that he tells me and share it with the broken world out there and say, hey, can you come and meet this guy that's done everything for me? And that's the story I want to tell, because we have a king who says that nowhere is beyond redemption, that a kingdom might have fallen 750 years ago, but he's going to come to just an ordinary woman, and he's going to breathe life, because that's what he does. And so, God, I just thank you that you breathe life into just our brokenness, however bad we might feel, however hopeless situations might be. I thank you that you breathe life into places that have become dead. And so, God, I pray you would take us as ordinary people, as average people, and that you would use us to help you usher in that kingdom and to spread the word of your goodness and of a king who brings life into dead places. Help us with that, we pray, Lord. Amen.